Back in school, geography lessons were always memorable. When me and my friends came to geography class, we were always filled with excitement. We were always filled with joy, and we always had a huge smile on our faces. One Friday afternoon, we came in, and as if we were not excited enough, what we saw in front of us took our excitement to the next level. For some reason, the regular teacher that we normally had couldn't make it that day, and there we saw, standing in front of us, a supply teacher. You don't need to have gone to school to know that the combination of excited young men on a Friday afternoon with a supply teacher is not ideal. But for me and my friends, Christmas had come early, and we quickly set about devising plans of how we could extract the most joy from the current situation. The first thing we did was quite harmless. When the register was called out, we answered to the wrong names, so that as far as the teacher was concerned, we all had the wrong identity. Like I said, pretty harmless. And we found it funny. Everybody in the class found it hilarious, and the teacher was annoyed because she didn't understand what the joke was. But 5 or 10 minutes later, we got bored, the novelty wore off, and we were soon trying to think of new ways to entertain ourselves. So my friend had an idea for a game. He was always innovating in such matters. The premise of the game was this: get in as much trouble as you can. Behave as bad as you possibly can, so that at the end of the day, when the regular teachers are back, the blame will go to the actual person whose name you are bearing. So the game started off quite steady. A few minor offences, but no major violations. But as the game continued, I realised that my friend was quite an expert at this. He was getting me in all kinds of trouble. He was being very rude to the teacher. He was answering back. He was making noises which definitely didn't belong in a classroom. And he was generally just being a little annoying idiot, something that he had perfected during many years that we were at that school. Anyway, I was losing. And everybody could see that. My friend was literally bringing shame and dishonor upon my name. And it hurt. I wasn't gonna have it. So I decided to do something huge. I decided to do something that would make my victory certain. I was going to do something that was going to get my friend in more trouble than any of us had ever been in. I reached in to my black Nike drawstring bag and I pulled out a can of Lynx deodorant, the official fragrance of a secondary school boy at the time. I stood on the table. I held the can of deodorant, I aimed it at the smoke detector, and I sprayed, and I sprayed, and I sprayed. When I was stood there, I didn't know exactly what was going to happen, but I knew that the consequences were going to be monumental. And believe me, they were. The next thing that happened was the sound of the fire alarm was ringing in all our ears, and the fire service was probably already on their way. We were being evacuated out of the classroom, and I was so happy with myself. My honor had been restored. I was the man. I'd won the game. And my friend, he was in deep, deep trouble. I'm going to stop the story there, and I'm going to tell you what happens at the end of the video, so make sure you watch it right until the end. In this series of videos, we have been covering this book, Talk Like TED, The 9 Public Speaking Secrets of the World's Top Minds. In the first video, we covered the topic, Unleash the Master Within. If you haven't watched that video, definitely go and give that a watch right now. In this video, we're covering secret number 2, master the art of storytelling. If you've watched many TED Talks or if you have listened to many speeches, you would have realized that many of them contain stories. They may contain stories at the beginning or stories at the end to conclude, or even stories in the middle. But somewhere during that speech, there will be a story, if it's a good one, most of the time. And there are reasons why that is done. And in this video, we're going to be covering 3 reasons why stories are so effective in some of the greatest speeches. The first reason is this: stories make information tangible. Many speeches contain graphs and statistics and data, and for many audiences, this information is quite abstract. And because it's abstract, they may not understand the significance of what you're saying. If you include stories, however, it gives the abstract nature of the information some context, and it helps to make it tangible. For example, I could say to you that in 10 years, 25% of the glaciers that now exist would have disappeared because of global warming. And the carbon dioxide emissions that are caused by people driving to work is a primary cause of this. If 25% of the people who currently drive to work decided to get public transport instead, this problem would be greatly reduced. Okay, doesn't sound too bad. Or I could tell you about Polly the polar bear. Polly the polar bear lives in the North Pole and she is raising 2 young cubs. She goes out and finds food for these cubs every day, and she makes sure that these cubs do not go to sleep on an empty stomach. These cubs are young and they're talented, and Polly thinks the world of them. What she doesn't know is that these cubs will only live to 9 years old. They are not even going to get to polar bear puberty. If 25% of the people who now drive to work decided to get public transport instead of living only to 9 years old, Polly's cubs would live to 16 years old. They would be old enough to attend the school ball, the snowball. If 50% of the people who now drive to work decided to commute instead, Polly's cubs would reach the age of 25 years old. They could get, if they wanted to, a university degree. Do you see what I've done? All that statistics, all that data has been converted into something tangible. The audience are more likely to relate to Polly and her cubs than they are to a bunch of numbers which are gonna fly out of their mind immediately and they can't relate to them in any way. So that's something you definitely want to do. If you have a lot of information, graphs and statistics, include a story. Give your information some context, make it tangible for the audience. That's point number 1. Point number 2. Stories engage more parts of our brain. Our brains are so complex, and different parts of the brain are activated depending on the information that we are currently consuming. So if we're listening to a lot of wordy information, the language processing part of our brain is activated. If we're looking at pictures, the visual part of our brain is activated. But if we're listening to stories, the language processing part of our brain is activated, the visual part of our brain is activated, the sensory part of our brain is activated, the motor part of our brain is activated. Basically, you get the point. When we're listening to stories, more parts of our brain are activated. And when that happens, we are more likely to retain the information that we're listening to, and we are more likely to remain engaged. Definitely take advantage of that in your speeches. Tell stories, activate larger amounts and larger areas of the audience's brain, and have them on your side. Point Number 3, stories create curiosity. Curiosity happens when there are gaps in our knowledge. And as human beings, we simply hate having gaps in our knowledge. That's why when we're watching films or watching a series and they end in "to be continued," we're frustrated. Stories are not too different. When you're giving a speech, try and create a gap in the knowledge of your audience by telling a story. Stories will create the gap in the knowledge. And as you tell the story, you will slowly fill that gap and you will retain the attention of your audience. When I was younger, my little sister used to play a horrible trick on me. She would say, "Asante, Asante, Asante." And I'd say, What? Nothing, I'm not telling you. And she would always get a reaction from me. Why? Because I was frustrated from having that gap in my knowledge and she would simply refuse to fill it. And many human beings are exactly the same. Use stories in your speech. Create gaps in the knowledge of your audience and then proceed to fill those gaps as you complete the story. I'm now going to fill the gap in your knowledge that I created at the beginning of this story when I told you about me and my friends playing this game of getting each other in trouble. So there we were being rushed out of the classroom and I was happy. I'd won the game, my honor and respect had been restored. I looked over to my friend and I saw that he was being taken away by the vice principal. And when I saw that, my happiness didn't last very long. My happiness was quickly turned into sorrow. My victory was quickly turned into remorse. I felt that no one deserved to be punished for something that they didn't do. And in the end, I earned up. And that's the first time that I learned the lesson that you have to choose your battles wisely. As nice as it is to win, it's more shameful to win at any cost than to lose gracefully. To recap the video, we have been making points about why stories are so effective in our speeches. The first point that we covered was that stories make information tangible. If you have graphs, statistics, data, very, very abstract information, tell stories so that you can add context to that and you can make your audience understand it better. The second point was stories activate larger areas or larger amounts of our brain. We want to keep our audience engaged and we want them to retain the information. So exploit that. Don't just take advantage of one area of the brain by giving one type of information, but use the whole brain. And telling stories helps to achieve that. And the third point was stories create curiosity. The entertainment industry exploits this all the time, and you should exploit it too in your speeches. Thank you for watching this video. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Definitely follow us on Instagram, where we will be doing a live Q&A on the content discussed in this video. So remember to comment with your questions. Until then, see you next time for Chapter 3.